Welcome to the participant story. Real people, real voices, and real experiences from inside clinical trials. In each episode, we sit down with a different guest to hear why they volunteered, what they experienced, and how participation in clinical research has changed their lives. The participant story is brought to you by Curevit Clinical Research. Curevit leverages technology, local healthcare infrastructure, and decentralized clinical trial elements to design and execute clinical trials where participants come first. Learn more about Curevit and their innovative virtual clinical site at curevit.io. The participant story is hosted by industry veteran and entrepreneur Dave Hanneman.
Good morning, TJ.
Morning, Dave.
Welcome to the Participants Journey podcast. Really happy to have you here this morning.
I'm really excited to be here, dialing in from sunny and hot and humid Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Outstanding. Well, I am in clear and sunny Park City, Utah, and we've had a run of really nice weather.
So we're happy for the summer to be over down here in Florida, and just hoping that we avoid hurricanes this year.
Yes, I hope that for you as well. As you know, TJ, because we spoke a little bit before we started recording, the Participants Journey is our effort to give a voice to people who have participated in clinical trials so that the world can hear your story. And I think that world includes future participants, current participants, certainly includes the industry and sponsors and the people that run clinical trials. So thank you for being willing to share your experience with us. And I think it will be enlightening for everyone who's involved in participating or conducting or supporting clinical research. So thank you for your contribution today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully there's some nuggets in here that will be helpful to each of those groups that you talked about.
So TJ, maybe to start with, tell us a little bit about your background. You're in Fort Lauderdale. You're from Philly. Give us a little notion of your background, how you spend your time.
I am just turned 50 and spent most of my pre-clinical research career as an IT project manager and consultant, ironically working in the pharmaceutical field when I first got out of college. So as we'll hear in a moment, I actually learned about clinical research way before I became a participant. But was an IT guy, played college football, moved down here just before I turned 30, and found that it's a pretty neat area to live down here. And that all was going well. It was I had a beautiful family. You can kind of see right over here over my shoulder. And then stage 4 melanoma came knocking. The story I do tell people is I did have a melanoma when I was 25 and was living in New Jersey. And I was told by my oncologist I had a 50% chance of recurrence. And to me, I thought that meant, okay, you need to stay out of the sun. You wear hats, definitely want to cover this head down here in Fort Lauderdale, but wear long sleeve shirts, wear sunscreen. And I did that very religiously. What I didn't realize is that it also meant that it could come back from inside me. And my body had melanoma in it for 12 years and kind of kept it at bay. And then right after my second child, my son, was born, I went in the hospital with what I thought was a spiking fever and left 16 days later with this diagnosis.
That must have been fairly devastating.
It was difficult. It was the General Hospital here, which is a great hospital. It's not maybe the top oncology center in the area, but when we went in there, it was just to get this fever checked out. And the ER doctor who admitted me, who's actually become a friend, him and I have done triathlon together and some other things. He told me, he goes, you with the spots on your lungs, your history of cancer, this is most likely a recurrence of your melanoma. And my wife had brought the 2 kids to her brother's house to go see their new baby. And I just thought I was in there for, something like some bug. And I didn't want to get my newborn sick. Mm-hmm. Next thing I know, it was 12 days without any food or anything to drink. I lost 30 pounds in the hospital. It was crazy that something that didn't seem like it was anything, just a spiking fever, but really was holding back, or holding in, this kind of terrible diagnosis. And when we talked with the oncologist afterwards, he didn't really know a lot about melanoma. He knew enough to tell Jen that, when she kind of asked, like, what are we looking at? He told her, very frankly, and probably fairly accurately, that he would be surprised if I was here in 2 years.
Mm. Mm. And two young children at that point.
Yeah, a 2-year-old and a 4-week-old when I went in the hospital.
Mm. Mm.
So
That's devastating.
Yeah, it was hearing you never see your kids go to kindergarten, kind of devastating. And I kind of remember thinking, like, that's not going to work for me. So we were going to find anything and everything we could that would give us a chance of some kind of full recovery, of a durable response, not just to get the many months that one of the doctors said, but I want a chance to watch these two, little guy and little girl, make their go make their first communion, graduate from 8th grade, go to college, all those sort of milestone things you take for granted that you're just going to be here for. I wanted them, and when we were kind of given the standard of care option from the first cancer center, I had done enough research and I knew enough about clinical research to know that there was an option out there that might not be an approved medicine, but it might be more cutting edge research. I had a lot of people that helped me look through this stuff and figured out very quickly that in 2012, that was sort of like the tide beginning to turn in oncology research, where immunotherapies and targeted therapies were just on the cusp of becoming like the next big thing in oncology research. So in a way, I got very lucky about the cancer that I decided to get, because melanoma was at the forefront of all that immunotherapy research. And we did our homework. We, as in me, my wife, my brother helped a lot. A friend, a good friend of mine, my old roommate, helped a ton, and kind of pieced together where is the best research being done, what is being researched. And when we realized very quickly that melanoma had a lot of promise for these new treatments, and it wasn't just going to be, here's a recycled chemotherapy with adding something else to it. We as a group, sort of the team TJ, as they called themselves, made the decision that we're going to explore clinical research options.
So say more about that. It sounds like you built your own team and you did your own research, and you made a decision to find clinical research. Is that accurate? And what was the role of your clinical caregivers in either supporting or helping lead that effort?
I think the decision that we made, probably the better way to frame it, is that we wanted to find a place, and it wasn't necessarily had to be, the biggest names in oncology research. We wanted to find someone who was doing research that gave that promise of the durable response. And for people who are in this industry, you know all the buzzwords, the median lifespan, and all the other metrics that we use to measure a drug's effectiveness and get it approved so people can take it. But for me, I was looking for that, not necessarily an N of 1 trial, but I wanted the best thing for me. And we've as an industry progressively gotten closer to more personalized medicine. But when we went looking for the answer or the cure, or whatever you want to call it, it wasn't so much that we wanted to find the best clinical trial. We wanted to find the science that we thought would really have the most impact on my health, and give me the best chance, or even give us the chance to sequence a number of treatments that could significantly extend my life. And that was the mentality we had. We went on and Jen and I took 4 separate trips to oncology centers, settling at Moffitt Cancer Center, which is in Tampa, about 4 hours from here, and a fantastic research team there. And one of the things, and this is a good thing for people who are considering clinical research, probably the best experience I had with an oncologist wasn't the one I ended up going with. And he was fantastic. He's an amazing researcher. But an oncologist down here at Miami Mount Sinai told me, I can give you this one immunotherapy that had been approved, but I think you need to go see Jeff Weber at Moffitt Cancer Center, because he's leading research and he probably has something that you would be a really good candidate for. You're young. Other than stage 4 cancer, you're pretty healthy. So you would be a really good participant in stuff that he's doing. And, I always think back, and I've seen him once or twice, and I remind him of the story, because those are the kind of healthcare providers that really understand where clinical research can sort of fit into your care. He could have given me anything. He could have given me an immunotherapy. He could have offered chemotherapy. And a couple of doctors did just that. They said, well, I can give you this. This gentleman took the time to say, I think that there's stuff that another researcher is doing that will show promise for you. You should go to him and see what he has to say. And then if you want to get treated here, I would love to have you as a patient. But that was my first real experience since I was 25 years old and doing IT stuff, into getting reintroduced to clinical research. And it really has stuck with me for 13 years now, because that level of foresight by this oncologist, and the care that he put into my care, there would be, because I did have more than one oncologist say, well, this is what I can give you. And that was really it. And well, that wasn't quite enough for us.
So it sounds like participating in clinical research was a foregone conclusion for you. It wasn't a question.
It wasn't a foregone conclusion, but everything seemed so promising. There was one immunotherapy that had been approved, and that's what the doctor said. I can give you this now, but I don't want to eliminate you from other options you may have. So if you get this now, you might not be able to get on a trial. And that put in my mind, okay, there's a role here in someone guiding me to do things in the right order or the right sequence, or making sure that when you try treatment A, you're not going to shut in the door to treatment B or C. And that was, for us, that was pretty important. It ended up not mattering in my case, because both trials that I participated on, I could have started with a drug. I wouldn't be able to do the first trial if I had just started that drug, but it wasn't that I excluded myself from anything. If I would have taken it, just would have been a separate option. The first trial I did involved the one drug that was approved, Yervoy.
Sorry, say that again. The first trial was?
The first trial I did was a T cell trial. It was a TIL trial, which is a adoptive cell transfer, but it also involved Yervoy, and it was an investigator-initiated trial. So for those of you at home who don't speak all this language, it means one person or one researcher at one hospital decided they had this theory. And the theory was that we had an existing immunotherapy that worked, and Stephen Rosenberg at the NIH him and his team had seen that there was a better response if you actually had been pre-treated with the immunotherapy and then did the TIL. So Dr. Maud Sarnaik, who's the researcher at Moffitt, he said, well, what would you think we could do if we did, there's 4 rounds of Yervoy. What if we did the first 2 rounds and see if that works in the tumor, or kind of in the lay language? I said, explain it to me like I'm a 5th grader. And he said, basically in lay language, we think that it opens up the tumor and the T cells then could go in there and attack, for lack of a better word. And then we're going to give you this T cell transfer. And what they did, they actually took one of my tumors out after the first dose of Yervoy, and they tested it in their lab. And they said, all right, which of these T cells are most successful at eliminating this cancer? They found the ones that, and don't ask me how they found it. That's way above my science pay grade. But then they lymphodepleted me, so they knocked my entire immune system out and put 60 billion of these T's. Like they expanded them in the lab and took one T cell and made it into 60 billion. So it's really cool medicine stuff. And that was the theory behind it was let's let your immune system do what it's supposed to do, which is kind of the theory behind immunotherapy. But let's see if we can, change the dials a little bit here by doing this combination therapy.
So it seems like you were, you've said you were committed to finding research, finding trials that would support your recovery and be durable, I think, as you said. You had some experience understanding what a clinical trial was because of your tangential work in the pharmaceutical space. But now you're speaking to real investigators, real oncologists. It's a real trial. Did you have any concerns at any point? What questions popped into your mind that you hadn't thought of before as you considered actually enrolling in a trial?
The first question I thought of, and this is, I try to make this as lighthearted as I can. The first question I thought of was, well, how have other people done this before? And Dr. Sarnaik responded, him and Dr. Weber kind of said, we don't think anyone's done this before. We don't think that anyone's actually had the Yervoy twice and then did all the TIL and then had it again. So their response was, we don't know. And I think there's a lot of people that would hear that and kind of get really uneasy. And I think the way that I try to say it is, I heard that and I saw it as an opportunity. Like I told him, I go, so you mean that no one's ever failed this before, right? I go, this is great. No one's failed this. It's going to be a great treatment, right? I'm going to be the number one, the patient number one on this therapy. It's going to change the way cancer is treated. And I'll be like the first guy, throw me on the cover of Newsweek or whatever. And it didn't work like that. But I think having the mentality of, this is going to be a chance for me to reach sort of that goal. And the goal wasn't to beat cancer. Like that wasn't ever I'm going to be like the guy who beat cancer. My goal was I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband. I want to be, the football coach and the kid soccer coach. Those are the things I wanted. Just keeping cancer at bay was just the means to that end. And it meant that if we had to, I hate to say take risks, but go into sort of uncharted territory and see what happens, then that's what I was willing to do. And there's a couple different things that happened along the way that could have pushed us in a different direction. And I think the resilience for Jen and I was, this is what we thought was the best. We still think this is the best. This is one of the best melanoma researchers in the world thinks this is what I should do. So we're going to continue down this path, even if there's a few hurdles that are going to get thrown our way, which there were.
What were the potential other directions that you became aware of or considered at that point?
At that point, we had the standard of care chemotherapy. I could have also done the Yervoy just as a monotherapy, just as a single treatment. And the anti-PD-1 drugs were just in their phase 1. Like that was when, if you know anything about cancer research in the last decade, you've heard about anti-PD-1 drugs. Well, the competing anti-PD-1 drugs were just getting ready to start their second trials. So there was that option for me. And then there's a couple other, high dose IL-2, which actually became a part of my trial as a supplemental thing. There was a few other options, but when we looked at it and looked at the chemotherapy option and realized, there's an 18-month, median lifespan, and 90% of the people will not live 5 years. And that was like, you don't, I don't want to say this wasn't a choice, but the options were so poor for late stage melanoma that clinical research was a no-brainer. And what I learned very quickly was I was lucky. And I said that earlier. Like I got lucky because the cancer that picked me just happened to be responding to these immunotherapy treatments better than anything else. And melanoma was at the forefront of most of those immunotherapy trials, even if it wasn't the biggest cancer out there. It wasn't the most common one, but it was one that was responding the most. And that's where a lot of research happened in the early 2010s. And I just happened to be one of the few that was fortunate enough to have those options.
So back me up for a moment. What year did you get your diagnosis and your devastating prognosis? And then what year did you actually enroll in your first trial?
It happened very quickly. It was right about now. It was August of 2012. So 13 years and a few weeks ago. And the trial was supposed we did the second opinion on September 11th. I remember that because obviously remember that day. And when we left, I said, this is what we want. One of the things about my story that I've told in like keynote talks and on panels was because it was a investigator-initiated trial, and there was a couple pharmaceutical companies, and there was like an anonymous donor or something. There was like 5 lawyers that had to sign off on the clinical research contract, and it just kept getting delayed. And it took me calling one of the pharma companies and kind of chewing them out a little bit. My Philly area roots came out of me a little there. Because it was, the woman who I spoke with, and I've told this story a number of times, she was really sweet and really caring and basically unhelpful. She said, well, our documents aren't processed. And that's why when I tell the story, I'm like, to you, this is a piece of paper. I'm gonna wave a little piece of paper around. But to me, this is my life. This is being a dad to these kids. This is being a partner with Jen. And I'm not going to wait for paper to get signed. And possibly miss out a chance on getting treatment. So we started in October of 2012. Finally, once it got signed, and I got the first dose of Yervoy. So it went very quickly, but it felt like forever because when you're waiting for that and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, it felt like it was forever.
You're touching on the size and complexity that is clinical research, from sponsors all the way through to participants. And you're describing a story where you interacted here with an employee of a sponsor who was caring and trying to do the right thing, but was just on a different time frame and wavelength than you were, it sounds like. Tell me, TJ, as a participant, what is your view? How did you experience all the various components of the trial, from investigator to sponsor to care team to your experience as a patient? What does it feel like? What does that size and complexity feel like?
It was the first trial really kind of ran the gamut of everything, because I was the first patient that was on this trial because of the delays in starting up. We had to shift. We moved over to the area, so we were taking our young little family and staying over there for a few months. The complexity of surgeries. I had to have a tumor taken out of me, so there's one surgery that was there. There was a second surgery. I had a very, very just bad luck diverticulitis, and they had to give me a colostomy bag for like 2 years. So there was a second surgery. There was the lymphodepletion, which being it was a leukemia, 2 leukemia drugs that knocks your whole immune system out. And then there was the hospital stay where they actually infuse the TILs in you, and then you get this high dose of IL-2 every 8 hours for however many you can tolerate. So there was and then that doesn't even count the 4 doses of Yervoy that were before and after, the 2 on each side. It was extremely complex, and I think one of the things that I recognized, because my second trial was not nearly as complicated, and I think one of the things that the team at Moffitt did a fantastic job of. I have great things to say about the team that was there, the operational team that got the trial kind of moving. My nurse navigator, Erica, I still keep in touch with her. I still see her once every few years. I still see Dr. Sarnaik. They did a really good job of shuffling these pieces and answering questions. Like they sat down. Eh, even the pharmacist came up to my room and explained how cytoxin and fludarabine, the two drugs for leukemia that was going to knock my immune system out, how they worked, what was likely going to happen, what the worst case scenario was, what's the best case scenario. So the care I got there was fantastic. And it is a great cancer center. It is a very well funded, big cancer center. And I know not everyone has that experience in some cancer centers, but they were very knowledgeable. They were very helpful. They went as far as like they shared the protocol for the trial with me, because it was there was a lot of calendaring things. All right, we need to do this here, and then 2 weeks later we have this surgery. So it was operationally, it was definitely a bit of a. I actually put the whole thing in Microsoft Project. It was my project management skills, so I could just, when everything would move, the whole thing would automatically shift for me. And I
So
think that
Microsoft Project, say more about how you managed all this and how your family managed it. And as a participant, what was the communication and management pattern that evolved from the beginning of the trial and all the way through? Who did you primarily communicate with, and what was that dynamic like?
So Erica, her name is a nurse navigator, and was sort of the head of everything in there that was not medically related. She and I would email back and forth quite a bit. Here's what the schedule is for this week. When things got delayed because the contract wasn't assigned, or when I had to have that surgery, she would work with me and say, like, all right, so now because of this surgery, we can't, and she would work with me and Dr. Sarnaik, the lead investigator. He would say, look, we need to give you about a month to recover. So that's going to kick the till back from November into January. So there was a lot of that. Dr. Sarnaik, I had his cell phone number and I had his email. And I've told him multiple times before, I go, do you ever actually sleep it? Because you would email me back at 1 a.m, and then at 6 a.m. there you are, sitting, at the bedside, ready to talk about my next infusion. And I developed a very trusting relationship with my team. I think they realized that I was really invested in this, and I've seen that in other participants that are invested in their care. I hate to say someone isn't, but my aunt, who passed away of sarcoma a few years ago, didn't have that same sort of take the bull by the horns mentality. She kind of just, I'm going to go where I'm told to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to clinical research like this, there's a lot of moving parts and unknowns. So you don't even, as the participant and as the caregiver too, you have this worry of, is this even going to work? That's with any cancer drug, but we're testing something out, but there's all these additional little things that come. Now, the flip side of that is you're getting great care. You're being monitored very well. And there is sort of a mutual benefit here for you to do well on this. The trial wants you to succeed. Certainly the sponsor company wants you to succeed. You want to succeed at this. So there's a lot of people who are invested in having this go well. And I think what I've seen as working in the industry now as a patient advocate and representative is that when we design clinical research that really takes the participant experience into account, we let the science guys do all the good chemistry and biology stuff, but we can also, for those of us who aren't as good at that, we can turn clinical research into something that's not just seen as an experiment, but really seen as possibly the best care you can get from a medicine standpoint and from an experience standpoint.
I want to circle back to your comments about the participant experience, but something you said just before that, you were talking about care, and we've been focused on research. And my understanding is that in the abstract, clinical research and clinical care are two distinctly different things. So I'm curious, what was the intersection of research and clinical care, and how did that evolve? How did that work for you?
I'll use my second trial as a little more of an example, because that was, I didn't, not to spoil the ending here, but I did not do well in the first trial. But I did well in the second trial. So, here, that I'm still here talking kind of tells you that it's the spoiler alert. The second trial was for one of the anti-PD-1 drugs. And, I think that when I showed up it's a local cancer center here in Fort Lauderdale. There's maybe 20 infusion chairs. It's a fraction the size of a place like Moffitt or MD Anderson or NYU or wherever. But when I showed up there, having gone through the previous 6 months of really involved care with a fairly big team, I kind of came in there and asked a lot of the right questions. Even to the point when I first walked in, the receptionist didn't even know what I was talking about. We don't have a melanoma trial. I go, yeah, you do. I go, it says it right here on clinicaltrials.gov that you have a melanoma trial and it's open here. So find me the person who's responsible for it, because I'm coming in. And I think that was probably a different experience for Holy Cross, because it's a small cancer center, and it's a Fort Lauderdale population that, where it is in Fort Lauderdale probably has a lot of older generation patients that, that are just dealing with this as part of life. They don't have a 37-year-old guy walk in the door with his baby and his 2-year-old and saying, save my life. Mm-hmm. So when I did that, I came in with the knowledge of how clinical research works, and that I wanted that kind of clinical care that I got at Moffitt, because that was the expectation that I had, that we were going to do everything we can to save this guy's life, and he's going to be involved in it. I'm not self-administering doses of anti-PD-1, but I want to understand what are the hiccups, what are the potential side effects, what do I do? And we had a couple of them, and we had a little triage plan. So we made 2 late night runs to the hospital during my first couple months on therapy. But we knew what to do. It wasn't like it was okay. This is what we was told it could happen, and this is the symptoms. And the triage plan is go to the emergency room, and we did. And that, I think having that expectation of care, I hate to say enhanced care, because I think all care should be like that, but involved care, I think that probably was not typical for many patients, but also it gave me a level of trust with my physicians. With the first oncologist that was there, him and I didn't have a great relationship. He left shortly after I started there. My second oncologist wasn't even a melanoma specialist. She was a breast cancer specialist. But her and I developed a fantastic mutual relationship with, she's like, all right. It's like, well, tell me what you learned in the last 3 weeks before I tell you what I think we're going to do. And she would ask me questions about not just how I'm feeling, but really what the care has been like. Are you getting this? Are you getting that? Let me check you out. Like, it was really, it became like sort of like that Cadillac. I call it the Cadillac of care. Not just because it was a trial or because there was a sponsor providing medicine, but we all had this sort of common goal. And I think setting that expectation up front for me when I came in there and like, no, this is what I want to do. And I mentioned the first oncologist, and he bedside manner was okay. At one point before the trial started, he came in and told me one thing, and I don't remember what it was, but his one of the assistants had come in 20 minutes before and told me the opposite thing. And I said, well, wait, well, you're giving me this, and she told me that. And he was like, well, are you telling me I'm wrong? I go, I'm not telling you you're wrong or she's wrong. I go, one of you, you guys need to get on the same page, because I need to understand what, and I think it was just when the trial was going to start. it was sort of holding that expectation, like, no, I'm just not going to wait here for you to tell me what to do. Like, I'm going to be an involved part of this process. And I think that really made a difference in making sure that I was at the right place and getting the right treatment.
It seems throughout this story that your self-advocacy and engagement filled in a lot of the potential white space between the various players, caregivers, and researchers. And you just gave an example. Can you maybe say more about that, about the role that self-advocacy and self-education play in successfully getting through a clinical trial as a participant?
Yes, I can say plenty about that. We might not have enough time to get everything in. I'll give you the highlights. And that's,
We'll have you back.
That's part of what I do now. It's, maybe we'll touch on that later, but being a part of the clinical research industry, my goal is to provide the right tools and the right information for patients so they don't have to be so dogged in their advocacy. Yes, as a patient, and I tell this to patients and the caregivers all the time, like, yeah, you are responsible for being your advocate. Like, there's no bigger advocate for yourself than you. And when I talk, I try to phrase it in ways that it's positive. But I will say, and I had this conversation with my aunt. I remember it clearly. I said, this may kill you. So you have to be diligent about going out and finding the right treatment, making sure that you trust the people who are entrusted with your care, that you're in communication with them, that you understand. I mean, the worst thing ever, because this happened to me, and I'm sure I've done it, is you sit there and you hear all this stuff come out of a physician's or oncologist's mouth, and you just try to process, and you go, what the heck did he or she just say? And we've had that. We've had it where my parents and Jen and I went and just got a second opinion, and we all walked out, and I said, all right, let's read back what we just heard. And my dad had a completely different take on it than the rest of us did. And it wasn't like he was wrong. He heard things differently. So when you are participating in clinical research, certainly if at all possible, don't go it alone. Rely on people that can help you out, that can do things like take notes or help do some literature research. We can't do a podcast without mentioning AI, right? So, utilize a tool. I would not advocate putting ChatGPT in instead of your oncologist, but you can use. I used a lot of, and this is well before machine learning and artificial intelligence. I will go out there on message boards. I go, this is my scan report. Can someone please tell me what this means? And I'm not the only. I'm by far from the only patient that's done that. That is like that proactive self-care, proactive and involved self-advocacy. I think has made a difference in a lot of patients that I've seen. And it maybe is a survivorship type bias, but a number of the good advocates I know had a similar mentality where this is my health journey and no one is going to be more invested in it than I am. So I have to do the work too. And that's even when I'm representing patients, in working with pharma companies or other health providers, I do say that. I say there has to be an onus on the patient to also, we can't try to just lay everything out perfect, because that's not the world exists. Medical research is not going to be perfect. Healthcare is not going to be perfect. So we are hoping that we can enable every patient out there and every possible participant to feel empowered and utilize the tools and the information that we can serve up to them as best we can. But it's ultimately going to reside with the patient and the participant to be that advocate. And I think there's a level of it's sort of leveling up as a patient when you start getting into clinical research and understanding and getting up to speed. And all right, yeah, I'm involved in this too, and I need to push for my own best interest alongside with being sort of laid out in a protocol or a schedule of activities.
It seems like your experience in your 2 trials, is it 2 trials you've been involved in?
Mm-hmm. So
It seems like your experience in the 2 trials you've been involved with or in has been very good from the standpoint of being supported by your family, by your own advocacy, and by the investigators, the physicians, the clinical care team. Talk to me about the other side of clinical research as a participant. Talk to me about the burden. Did you feel a burden at any point? Did your family feel a burden? You seem like you had great support. Was it also difficult, and in what ways?
Yes, there was burden for sure. Especially the first trial was so involved that I don't think there was a way to avoid some burden. Things like scan. I mentioned the diverticulitis before, and had to kind of come in for, did a scan and they didn't really let me know. It was on the schedule of activities, but we kind of just overlooked. There was like a couple different times where I was like, man, like I didn't read this well enough, or I didn't understand this well enough. I think that burden right there is the first one, is just the burden of comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
The second, sort of the follow up to that is, all right, how do I adhere for the industry people out there? How is my adherence going to be to what I'm being requested to do or being required to do, and how can I best manage that given whatever my life situation is? I talk quite a bit about, when, as I've worked in the industry designing trials and tools for trials that reduce or eliminate burden when possible. And that kind of the Craig Lipset, a very well-known former Transcelerate colleague of mine, has said, we need to bring trials to the patient where they are, not the other way around. And I think that's been a focus of the industry for the last decade. And I'm happy to say that I've gotten to be a small part of that, taking the burden away from the person, and taking it away from the site too. Like there's a whole other podcast probably just on reducing burden at sites, because I know many clinical research facilities don't have the resources like a Moffitt might have. So how do we design clinical research that lessens the burden on the patient, lessens the burden on the caretaker and their family, reduces stress, takes the burden off of the site as well, because they're managing a lot of different things. It's not just TJ's trial that, I walk into Holy Cross and everybody drops drops everything they're doing and rolls out the red carpet, even though it feels like it sometimes, which is great. There's a lot that we do as an industry to say, okay, how can we design and deploy effective clinical research that is, I hate to say the word enticing, because that's, you're going to get in a little gray area there, but that is an opportunity. When I signed up for both of my trials, the medicine was first, but also getting good care was part of that. And I think that I've pushed a lot of people in the industry to say, this isn't just about getting the medicine through kinds of regulatory approval. We are providing hope. We are providing life. We are providing a better quality of life. We are doing all those things that are impacting humanity. And then I'd say it sounds like so drastic, but like that's what the pharmaceutical world does. It impacts the human health. And what a great opportunity it is to not only have really good biology, but to develop the ecosystem around it that delivers that in a way that really lets me as a patient or a participant have the optimal experience regardless of the actual medical outcome.
You mentioned participant experience earlier, and I said I wanted to come back to that. In the context that you've just been speaking, I'm curious, TJ, as to your thoughts on how has the participant experience evolved in the 10 to 15 years that you've been a participant, and what evolutions, what changes has the industry made to improve that participant experience? And then maybe importantly, talk to me about where you'd like to see it go.
There's been a ton of evolution in this, and I think the awareness of patient engagement has really sort of taken off. When I started doing this, I started speaking about my experience, but also then going to conferences, listening a lot to it, and had opportunities to work with pharma or with service providers that did technologies. There was this concept of patient engagement, but it is very poorly defined, if at all defined, and it really needs a little bit something different to everybody. So where I've seen the industry go is we might not know exactly what we're doing or the best way of doing patient engagement, but we just need to get started. And to a lot of companies' credits, even with even in a world where sometimes funding's hard for, patient engagement programs, companies continue to push it. I mentioned Traincelerate earlier, which is it's a collaboration between pharma companies that looks to increase better clinical research in non-competitive areas. So I worked with them for 4 or 5 years, and they put a whole thing out, like a 65-page guideline, or not a guideline, but it was basically how do you interact, how do you help engage patients in designing protocols. And it's free to use, anyone can download it. I've seen that repeat itself in some way, shape, or form consistently, where we recognize that we can impact patient care outside the medical part of this, impact patient care by giving better information, by allowing patients to help us co-design tools. I did quite a bit of that with metadata and Medable, designing the interaction. So if I have something that happens, I have one of those adverse events, something goes wrong, everyone's got a phone now. I can log it. I can take a photo of it and submit that. I have to find, I have a picture of it, but when I first started my trial, my second one, the digital date, whatever the word is, digitalizing the EDC stuff they still hadn't done it. So literally we're writing on scraps of paper what my blood pressure was, what my heart rate was, and getting people away from that source of truth or information and say, no, like, we have all these tools that will capture information accurately, that our site can use, that our patients can use, and that then our sponsors can rely on to deliver very good information in real time, real time, that accurately captures what that journey is for the patient, what's medically happening. So I think that part of patient engagement has come quite a ways. And just as digital tools evolve and digital health technologies have evolved, we're learning more how to capture the right data, and we're able to, without being invasive, maybe capture other data. And I think that's the next step. That's where I want to see it go. I mean, everyone's got a health app on their phone. I have a Ring and a watch that captures biometrics data. Aligning passive data intake with what an experience is, and then using technology tools, using things like machine learning and AI to start correlating this. I feel lousy on today, and I slept lousy last night. Well, that's an easy one to do. It's all right, the baby was up crying, and that is a easy correlation. But is it all right when you have a medicine and a couple of days later a blood pressure spike or whatever it may be? How do we get that next level of information that we can then use in real time or very close to real time? So if I'm going, I don't want to have to wait every 3 weeks to go to my oncologist to learn that something I'm doing is either beneficial or maybe possibly harmful. And I think that's where we can design better clinical research. We can design research that is able to share data that is being collected, maybe not everything or not everything immediately, but we can really utilize the power of technology to give me as a participant something that's beneficial to me right now. and beneficial to me and my healthcare provider. And in reality, it probably can be beneficial to the entire population if you see things and get insights in much quicker time rather than wait for a 3-year trial to be finished and then publish all the results.
You talked about AI earlier. You've just been talking about things like wearable devices, digital tools. The FDA, of course, has guidance on what they call decentralized clinical trial elements. I was at a presentation the other day, and the statistic on the number of physicians who are using AI daily is now staggering, in my opinion. All that is a way to set up my question, which is, TJ, what do you think the experience of a participant in a clinical trial is going to be like? How is it going to be different 5 years from today versus 10 years ago when you first participated?
I'd like to think that little last part about gathering data, and I think I talked about with Craig about bringing a trial to a patient. I'd like to think that there's going to be a huge element of that in the decentralization. What we have talked about constantly in the advocacy world is we don't want a fully decentralized trial. The world that's not really what the patient wants. The patient wants to have options to understand what things are required that I need to be at this clinic for. I've had experience having to just driving back and forth to Moffitt. Once I kind of put my foot down and said, I can go get a blood draw at Quest 4 blocks from here. Why do I need to drive 8 hours round trip so you can pull my blood and tell me what it says? And that's not even, I've known someone who also did a TIL trial who had to fly from New Zealand to Boston and basically do that. Get a blood draw, meet with her doctor, go over the results. And that was 20, he was in Boston for 6 hours and on the plane for 4 times that. So it's crazy that that is still a mindset that we've had. And these are all stories that are a decade old. I think that COVID certainly shifted a lot of the mindset there, where we had to figure out how do we do things without necessarily being in constant physical presence. My hope is that we continue to evolve those tools, but also evolve the sort of the change management behind it, because it's a mindset. And I mentioned about just writing things down on scraps of paper. That's the Holy Cross doesn't do that anymore. They have laptops they wheel right in and they enter it right in, which is great. It's just one small example, but it takes the people changing too. I've sat next to a clinical research associate and on a plane, and she told me flat out, she's like, no, they'll always have to write information down on paper. And we argued for about an hour about this. And I said, no, it's actually not what the FDI guidance suggests. And, that you have to have a source of truth for information. But if a digital blood pressure cuff on me I have one downstairs, I can just zap it to my phone. And now I have the source of truth. It's not, I'm not writing things down. I'm not having to send, CSV files or anything. This is an integrated medicine. And I think that world in 2030 is going to be even more pronounced, where things will seamlessly work together to manage your healthcare. You're seeing that with some of the apps that the EHR apps that are out there that do a very good job of allowing you to see your health information online. The holy grail of EDC to EHR integration will be fantastic. So we can I want to be able to see everything I've ever done in one place. That goes back to my NYU 1999 surgery to remove that first melanoma from up here. What are the things that I've had in my medical past that can connect and give any physician, this is the full TJ story, without me having to bring the binder that's sitting over there and show them, well, here's my stuff from 1999, and here's 2012, and here's 2024.
I'd like to come back to your personal journey, TJ. How has participation as a patient in clinical trials combined? Well, let me leave it there. How has being a participant in clinical trials changed your life, your family's life, and the trajectory of your life since your first diagnosis?
Well, I'm here, so there's the first big thing that's it's changed
Yes.
that. And that's the thing I'm most grateful for. It's given me a career. Like I said, I work in the pharma world. I have my own little consultancy that I do. I've worked with a number of, top pharma companies. I work with a couple. I mentioned a few of the vendors and a couple CROs I've worked with that I can bring patient voices in. I think I do a pretty good job of that. I do the speaking. It's great to go out there and tell a story that maybe inspires somebody. So I've gotten to do that a whole bunch of times, and I love that because I think that it's more than just, oh yeah, this guy survived. Like you can get 100 cancer survivor stories out there, and they're all good. I would much rather hear someone else's than mine. I think the reason that I like telling my story so much is because I believe that it illuminates places where we can do better, but it also kind of gives that, not just hope. Hope's a terrible way to say it, because hope comes in a lot of different ways, but it gives that maybe a little bit of motivation to say, like, not only has this guy survived and these little kids are now these big kids, but now he's like sitting next to us working, and that was great. When I started sitting with the people I had heard speak at the DIA conference or at ASCO, and also I get to sit next to them and help them design tools, or I get brought in to help give a patient voice and not just a TJ story, but hey, like, TJ, you've learned a lot about this. You've listened to a lot of patients. You can fairly educatedly speak on what a patient journey could be like, and the pitfalls and the barriers that we as an industry might not see that you can pick up on. So it's given me this whole different world and a purpose that I don't know that I ever would have found without it.
That's excellent. That's nice to hear. What piece of advice would you give someone considering participation in a clinical trial today?
I don't want to tell you just to do it. I think it's awesome that you're considering it. If you are considering it, I would 100% say do your homework, ask questions, utilize whatever digital tools. The internet is still a bit of a wild, wild west place for medical information. So make sure you're getting good, trusted sources of information, and lay out what your plan is. What are your goals? What's your plan to get there? How does a treatment or a trial sequence into that? Because when we were still getting the contract signed at Moffitt, I already had plan B, and we started thinking about plan C at some point too. So it's okay to question and to not push back, but be very involved with your physician. And if you find that there's someone who's not very involved or doesn't want you to be involved, might not be the right physician or the right trial for you. Because I've talked to a lot of clinical researchers, and very, very few I've ever met that would not encourage, go get a second opinion. Make sure you feel comfortable with this treatment choice. We want you to be the feel that this is the best option for you, because a fully committed patient and participant certainly is much easier to manage in a trial, makes the trial better, and ultimately is going to take some of the burden off of the sites, because they're really going to be an active part of their care.
Well, I've very much enjoyed our conversation, TJ. Is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
We've talked about so much, it's kind of hard to remember what I haven't. I think one of the things maybe I'll just leave you with, rather than asking a question, is sort of the way I like to end my keynotes. I think there's a lot of sometimes difficult perception about those who work in clinical research and maybe in healthcare. It's certainly not always an easy field to work in pharmaceuticals. So if you do work in this field, or if you know someone who does, make sure that you recognize that the things that you're doing really make a difference in the lives of millions of people that you'll never know, but whose lives you'll impact forever. Like this little girl and this little boy right back here, because what you do, it changes the sort of the course of human health, and that is a really amazing, awe-inspiring place to be.
I can't think of a better note to end the discussion on. So, TJ, thank you very much for sharing your story. I look forward to seeing you in the industry.
I can't wait for it, Dave. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate everybody out there listening. Keep doing great work, because we definitely need as many good people pushing this forward as we can.
Hear, hear.
The participant story is brought to you by Curavit Clinical Research. Curavit leverages technology, local healthcare infrastructure, and decentralized clinical trial elements to design and execute clinical trials where participants come first. Learn more about Curavit and their innovative virtual clinical site at curavit.io.